Good morning, church. Man, it's been a day. I'm just going to be honest with you, it's been a day. So I'm glad that you're here today. Glad that we get to do this thing as we continue in our series, Sermon on the Mount. And what we did last week is we began to look at the case studies that Jesus gives for this greater righteousness that we're called to. He's basically going, again, just to kind of catch us up, Jesus says, I haven't come to abolish the law. Yeah, I'm doing a new thing, but it's going to actually be fulfilling the law and accomplishing the law rather than abolishing it. And he goes, let's talk about some examples. And last week we kind of went through what the greater righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees would look like. And it's also helpful for us to realize Jesus is doing wisdom teaching here, which means it's insights into the way of things, right? Wisdom is insight into the way of how things work. That's what wisdom basically is. And the things that he's specifically speaking of are everyday moral issues, so ethics. So Jesus is basically philosophizing about, here's what actually is the reason why murder is wrong, right? Here's the reason why adultery is actually wrong, and here's why divorce in the context that they especially had operating then is so dangerous and so unhealthy and unhelpful and dehumanizing for women and all these things. And so he's dealing with all these right and wrong things, and at the core of what he's doing here, he's going to what's really the reality of things. That's what we looked at last week. If you weren't here last week, it was the real reality of things. Like, this is how things have appeared to you sometimes of what you might think is right and wrong. Now, let me tell you what's really real is what Jesus is doing, okay? Yeah? And so it's an alternative way of living as a person in this world. And I think that's valuable because, like I've already said before, I think too many people think that Jesus' main focus is really to help you figure out how to get into the next world. Like, his main focus is just to kind of get you to heaven, and in the meantime, best of luck. And like, Jesus isn't as concerned about it. Instead, actually, he keeps on saying, I'm here to invite you into the kingdom of heaven here and now. I want you to not just wait to live in another world. I want to get real practical about what it looks like to live in this world as the kingdom of heaven invades this world. And so he talks a lot about the Old Testament. And he's taken us through these Old Testament laws to explain the heart of them. And like we talked about last week, and Zhang, you helped me out last week. Thank you so much. I hope you'll be here next week because I'm going to need you next week as well. So just... There we go, good. Because Zhang was helping me show about how kids in the back of the car, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. Parents aren't like, you know what, I did say don't touch your brother or don't touch your sister. And even though your hand's all up in their face, you're not touching them. So, yeah, you got me there. No, the parents are going, no. You got to understand the reason for the rule. Yes? Come on, yeah? So, because understanding the reason for the rule will help us to do a better job of abiding by the rules. So as it comes to like Jesus' rules and the way we engage with God's law, understanding the rules helps to properly abide with them. So we buckled up, and we're on Jesus' ride through the first of those three thematically grouped laws. So again, this is just a little bit of review of last week. Bear with me here. But the first two were straight out of the Ten Commandments. The first one was do not murder. And Jesus says, yup, but make sure to realize that other ways that you devalue and dehumanize people, and perhaps more common than murdering people, that doesn't please the Lord, for us to dehumanize and devalue people. So make sure you understand that. And then Jesus goes, okay, next one. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery. Again, Jesus is like, yep, that's a good one. But if you're doing the thing in your heart and you're doing it in the heart area, you're still guilty of doing the thing. It's not like, well, it's acceptable alternative to do it in your heart but not do it in reality. He's like, no, it's still as bad. Treat image bearers with dignity, not as objects you can use. That was what Jesus gets to in that. And then he says about divorce, and he calls out this loophole, which was a hot debate in their day and age, which was, again, because men were the ones who divorced women in that day and age. So could a man just go, for whatever reason he wanted, I'm done with you, figure out life without me providing for you and taking care of you and all kind of stuff? And so Jesus goes, no, that's not how this works. That's not the way of his kingdom. So the first of the three case studies that Jesus is taking us through, basically we're seeing this. God's greater righteousness demands that we treat everyone with dignity, especially the particularly vulnerable. Right? So that's what, again, if you weren't here last week, you just got the 5-minute version of it. There you go. Like, that is it. Like, God's greater righteousness that he calls all of us to do is to treat everyone with particular with dignity, particularly the vulnerable. Now, I pointed out last week when it came to murder, that specific one, and again, if you were here, you remember this. Jesus talks about like murder and then being ragefully angry at people and then insulting them like you're good for nothing and then insulting them and be like, you're just a moron. It seemed to de-escalate as far as the actions go. Yes? Murder's worse than calling someone a moron, most of us would say. Yeah, so it seemed to de-escalate in the actions, but yet Jesus was also escalating the consequences of that. And we pointed out how this is, one, to kind of point out that the heart of the matter matters. Jesus is going, you're thinking, that's not a big deal, but he's trying to really drive home a point. God cares about your heart. But it's also interesting to note that the actually triad, the three things he talked about, seem to de-escalate in seriousness as well. Using a wife as an example, murdering your wife, cheating on your wife, divorcing your wife. They seem to, again, none of them are good, just so we're clear, but like we would agree, like murdering would be the most severe of all those. Okay, so you got all track with me? So what I'm saying is here, I think Jesus, if you allow me, I think he's kind of going like, listen, and here's the theme, we're treating people with dignity, so don't murder or even hate, and don't, it's kind of now, because it's not an exhaustive list. Jesus isn't going to get into every single example for what he's talking about. He's like, you see the trend here? We're like, yeah, I think I see the trend. He's like, okay, keep going with it. Yeah? So he's going like, now that we've seen all these serious ones, keep going in that direction. Example, now apply it. Now the kingdom of heaven advances as more and more of God's sons and daughters treat people more and more with dignity as other image bearers. The kingdom of heaven advances and is matured and healthy as people continue to develop and deepen in that life ethic of doing that. So the next triad, though, gets on a different level of kingdom ethics. And it's a level that's a bit more technical and nuanced. It ventures into the realm of working together as people with other people, which is difficult. Can I get an amen? Working with other people can be challenging. How do we trust each other? And how do we build trust with each other? How do we handle the very, very rare thing of being mistreated by others? I was waiting for the laugh on that one. How do we handle mistreatment by others? And what if it goes so far as not just being like, kind of a mistreating moment, but we actually start developing true enemies? Like, what do we do with them? So that's where Jesus goes in this second triad. And these three are loosely tied together, just like the other ones were. And so I had originally planned to preach all of them today. And I will tell you, I had originally planned that all up until this morning. So I'm having a day. When I say I'm having a day, it was one of those things where, like, this morning I got up and I was just like, no, I can't do it. I have a certain number of pages that my notes are, and I know how long the sermon's going to be. On Mother's Day of all days, it would have been one of the longest sermons in a long time. And I was like, no, I'm not going to just, I was like, well, maybe if I sit down, because then the church can get all three together and get the sense of how Jesus is flowing. And anyway, all that to say, I really felt like I couldn't do that. And here's the reason why. These are such dense things. For one, the first one that we're going to look at is a practice, and this is what we are getting into today. It's a practice that is culturally more or less obscure to us. So we're going to have to work to understand something that we don't normally have as an everyday practice in our lives. So that's the first one. The second triad is what I believe is, or the second chunk of teaching in this triad is what I believe is literally one of Jesus's most misunderstood teachings of all time. It is the turn the other cheek. What does he actually mean by turn the other cheek and go the extra mile and give them if they go for your coat, give them your shirt as well? Here's what I will say. Please come back next week when we get into that and the last one, because we'll group those two together. This is possibly one of my favorite parts of the whole Sermon on the Mount. One of the parts for me that is so eye-opening because it's been so much misunderstood that I think it deserves its own sermon. So that's why. So there's that one. And then the third one, so we have the first one, cultural practice that is obscure. We're going to have to kind of go, work to figure that out. Second one, we're going to have to work to understand what is Jesus actually saying when he says turn the other cheek. And the third one is actually the most clear, probably, of all of Jesus' teaching. And it's as clear as it is uncomfortable because it's the love your enemies one. And so we have to work to kind of go, okay, Jesus, okay, what does that look like? How are we going to do that? So we would have a lot of work to do there. So I figured let's make it easy today. And let's just do one of the third of it all. Yeah? So we're going to, at the end of the day, here's what actually sealed the deal for me to decide to just preach this today. And real quickly this morning, amongst getting the kids ready and taking care of them and all, to go and do this, is because preaching is meant to do more than inform. It's meant to transform. Yeah? And application isn't therefore optional, but critical. Like you and I figuring out what we do with this, applying it isn't optional, it's critical. And I would rather give us less to be focused on, meditating on as we leave here today, and applying principally to our lives to kind of look and go, okay, here's the principle. What does this look like in my life? I'd like to do less so we actually have to do some application in our life than to have Jonathan go, I did it all 3 of them. I completed the triad today, and I feel good about myself. And y'all are just like, he was over an hour today, and you now have so much going on, you're left with too much to do too much with, really. And so you kind of move along, and you're like, wow, that was a lot. Maybe you're kind of wowed by a few things, you take them with you. But I want transformation today, and I want it next week as well. So we'll just deal with 5 verses today. And we'll be here for 45 to 50 minutes, 60 minutes. Anyway, so we're going to talk about oaths, okay? Y'all ready? Okay. It's a cultural practice that is a lot more prominent and involved for them in Jesus' day than it was for us. And as we're going to see today, there were all kinds of peculiar processes that they had for making promises sometimes. And in fact, to set things up for us, I think before we jump into the Sermon on the Mount, since we were buying some time, this morning I real quickly added things into my sermon, because that's what I do. It's just my personality. I'm like, oh, I could just go real short. And I'm like, nope. I want us to get, because y'all come for some good preaching, right? And you'll deal with whatever you get today instead, anyway. But here's what I think is interesting. There's a story that many of you probably have read or heard, but maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, get ready. That's in the Bible. It's one of those head scratchers of promise making and going, what do we do with this? And I figured, what a great time to talk about it. So we'll kind of frame it up with this story first, and then we'll get to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Judges 11, 29 to 40. There's this guy named Jephthah. And he actually was the son of a prostitute. Our kids are not in the room? Good, okay. Yeah, son of a prostitute. So his brothers and family members were like, yeah, you're not really one of our family. And so he was kind of an outsider and all that. And so they go to him, though, when the going gets tough. Israel's under attack, and they're like, Jephthah, we need your help. So the Spirit of the Lord, here we go, was upon Jephthah. And he passed through Gilead and Manasseh and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead, he passed on to the Ammonites. And those are the enemies, just so you know. The Ammonites are the bad guys, okay? So they have the shadows around them, the bad guy kind of thing. Been hanging out with my neighbor, 4-year-old, who loves bad guys, cops and robbers, that kind of thing. Anyway, and Jephthah made that's going to be important, right? He made an oath. He made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. You got to wonder, is he having marital problems? I mean, you say, wow, Warren, but what did he expect to come out of the door of his house? There are not many options really coming out of the door of your house. And, honey, I'm home. What was he expecting? I'm kind of joking, but also I'm kind of what on earth was he thinking? Obviously, I think he was thinking, I'm going to make some intense vow here to the Lord, right? So whatever it is, if it's my favorite sheep or if it's a lizard or whatever it might be, it's going to be a burnt offering to the Lord. So Jephthah, making that vow. Yeah, we're all tracking? He crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. And he struck them from Ur to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities. That's a lot of cities. And as far as Abel Karamim, with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Interesting theological pause here for a moment, because I think it's good for us to ask some hard questions sometimes. And one is, it seems like God blessed this, right? It would seem that way. Thank you, Taylor, for, yeah. So Jephthah goes, I'll kill whatever, I'll offer as a burnt sacrifice, anything comes through, and he makes this vow to God. God heard him. Okay. And so then he goes to battle. 20 cities clobbered. He defeats. It seems like God blessed this guy. Okay. Then the question is, did God bless him because of the vow or in spite of it? Yeah, it doesn't necessarily say, does it? Because I think we can presume quite a bit in stories as well as in life, in our own stories. And that can be dangerous. Because, in fact, Jephthah himself probably presumed a lot in this moment. Probably presumed, one, that if God allowed him to do that God was for everything he'd done. Right? If God gave him the victory, then God was stamp of approval on this vow and everything else. And he also presumed, again, probably presumed that he wasn't going to have to do what he was about to have to do. because of the vow that he made. So he's presuming a lot. And so anyway, I just want to say real quickly that it's probably really good for us to be careful when we look at like success, and like God must be in that, because look at the success. God must be for all of it that led to that. Because I will argue, as we're about to see, that I don't think Jephthah is the hero who's like, hands are clean, he's done everything right, and unto the Lord. Okay? Because then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, who comes out? His daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. So she came out celebrating him. You did it, Dad. Good job, Dad. You won. She was actually, it goes ahead and tells us, she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. So it wasn't just like only daughter. He had no other children except for this girl. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low," which I'm sure felt great to come out with tambourines and music and have your dad do that. "You have become the cause of great trouble to me, for I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." And she said to him, "My father, you've opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites." So she said to her father, "Let this thing, though, be done for me before you do what you need to do. Leave me alone for 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions." This is a cultural kind of thing. Again, she's young enough to not have been married yet, so she's going, "I will never be married. I will never get to have children of my own. I'll never get to have, my time is ending." And so he said, "Go." And then he sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and wept for her virginity on the mountains. And at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, 4 days in the year. And then the story moves on to the next judge. And again, since we have the time, let me just go ahead and say that is one of the challenging things about reading the narratives of the Bible, especially in Judges, because you read this and you go, should I go and do likewise? Like if I'm up in so here's the moral of the story. We go, if you're in a battle, make a vow that you'll kill anything that comes out of your house, and then keep the vow, and God will give you the victory. That is obviously not the moral of the story, okay? Obviously not. So what do we do with a passage like this? What a sad story this is. There are a number of sad stories in the Bible, quite frankly, but this is one of the top ones for me. It really is. Anybody else? Like, why? Why? The scripture doesn't always answer the why question, but fortunately, Jesus, as the accomplisher and fulfiller of the Old Testament law, is going to shed some light as we get into the Sermon on the Mount. So let's jump into the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm actually going to read both today and next week from a different translation than we usually do. We usually use the English Standard Version, ESV. We're going to be in the Holman Christian Standard Bible, and you'll see why, because it's going to help take some of the Greek and the original language and explain it in a way that I think is going to make more sense for us. So here we go. Verse 33, Jesus says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors," or the footnote there says ancients. So I think it's great. Wouldn't we all agree that Jesus is an ancient one? And like the first century Jewish history is an ancient one. And Jesus himself is going, y'all remember the ancients, the old people back in the day? Like, it just shows how ancient we're getting, how far removed culturally we're getting to when we get to what Jesus is now pulling into teaching about. He says, here's what we've heard from them. You must not break your oath, but you must keep your oaths to the Lord. But I tell you, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven, because it is God's throne, or by the earth, because it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, which was apparently one of the ones they would do, because that's the city of the great king, God. Neither should you swear by your head, because you can't even make a single hair white or black. But let your word be yes, be yes, and your no be no. Anything more than this is from the evil one. So, first things first as we study this passage today. The whole, hey, you've heard it said, you must not break an oath, but must keep oaths to the Lord. This is actually the first time in these examples that Jesus is giving us that is a teaching from the Torah, but not an actual quote from the Torah. Like, this isn't actually one where you go and there's a specific quote. What he's actually doing is pulling from multiple passages of the Torah to create a new sentence that summarizes them. And we'll real quickly show you a couple of them. Like Leviticus 19:12. It says, "You shall not swear by my name falsely," God says, "and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." So Yeah, so Leviticus 19:12 says, don't swear my name falsely. Numbers 30:1-2 says, Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the people of Israel, saying, this is what the Lord has commanded. If a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. So again, don't swear falsely. I'm God. I care about how you swear about me. Moses is telling people, hey, if you make a promise, you make an oath, you got to keep it, which, of course, Jephthah knew, right? So that's why he did it. And then we'll finish off with Deuteronomy 23, again, Old Testament law that Jesus is referring to. It says, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But, now friends, listen to this part. It's in Deuteronomy. It's in the Old Testament law. It said, but if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. Essentially going, but if you don't, then it won't be a guilty thing if you don't do the thing, right? Oh, that Jephthah would have heard that, because it was written before he lived, you know? Oh, that he would have heard that, understood that loud and clear. Maybe he wouldn't have made such a foolish oath. Maybe he wouldn't have done such a terrible thing. Because here's how oaths worked. Oaths were a device back in ancient times where basically at least two people or people groups, parties, were ideally needing something, a tool to be used to help them work together in some capacity. So, like, dude, I swear, you can count on me. I'll be there on Friday to help you move. Yeah? Like they would make these promises. I swear by the moon and the stars in the sky, I'll be there. I was waiting to all for one fans? Yeah. For better or worse. I just love that song. Someone work it in. Anyway, as we see from these verses, though, and we would generally know from experience, if you're going to make a vow, if you're going to make a promise, the, cream of the crop, the ultimate promise you would make, not triple dog dare, but, I swear to, you can say his name in church. Yeah, because you just said his name. So, I swear to God I will do this. That would be, the ultimate, okay, you better mean it because you're messing with the biggest of the bigs when you say you swear to God. Yeah? So we don't understand. That carries the most weight. That takes whatever you were promising, whatever your word was. Y'all track with me? It takes whatever your word was, and now it's now I can trust you because you just did that. Now, here's the thing. The Jewish people of Jesus' day, and well before that, had gotten to a point where they were like, we're supposed to revere the name of God. And so we probably shouldn't be swearing to God. Because either way, if we do fulfill it or don't, that's really not a good idea to be doing. And so you'd think, okay, what are they going to do instead of that? They took that good and valid concern and got really creative and just got into some silliness. Because they still wanted to use oaths to prop up their promises, to make them be trustworthy. So they got creative. They started swearing in different ways to convince people that you can trust me. You can trust me. I swear by heaven. I swear by earth. I swear by Jerusalem. I swear by my head. You're like, okay, this is foreign to us, right? Because if somebody was like, hey, I swear to God, I'll help you move, you'd be like, okay, I've heard that one before. They're like, I swear by my head, I'll be there to help you move. You'd be like, maybe don't come. Maybe don't. Check your head. Get your head checked out, because I don't think you should be coming and helping me move heavy things. In fact, we get a glimpse of what the silliness had gotten to via one of Jesus' most pointed teachings that he gives as he rightly calls out the teachers and the corrupted people in power of his day. So Matthew 23, you have Jesus going to the Pharisees and going, woe to you, you blind guides, who say, this is what they apparently taught people, hey, if anyone swears by the temple, it's nothing. You can do it or you cannot. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, you're bound by your oath. You blind fools, Jesus says, which one is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, apparently the Pharisees said this too, if anyone swears by the altar, it's nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, well, then he's bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Jesus is basically doing what any good and right teacher would do. Is like, quit playing games. Right? Because that's what they were doing. This is utter silliness right here. Yeah? Hey, Larry, sorry. I know you're kind of calling me out on that thing I promised you, but I swore by the temple. not the gift, or not the gold of the temple. So technically, I don't really need to do it. I don't understand it, but that's apparently how they would operate. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jenny. I know I said I was going to do that, but I swore by the altar and not the gift of the altar, so you should have caught that one. It's like kids, like, I promise you. And you know what's behind my hand right now, right? I promise you I'm going to do it. It's like adults. We can still do the same thing. Fine print. No, see, here's the thing. You maybe didn't catch I said, if this. I kind of created that caveat. I guess you didn't catch that I said that. It's a way where we go ahead and work our way around promises and things that we say we're going to do. And so while we kind of understand it, this is still a little bit more culturally complicated than we would see at first glance. And so one of the people that has really helped me to understand this, Dallas Willard, American philosopher and seminary professor, author of The Divine Conspiracy, he points this out, and I'll start off actually by paraphrasing the beginning of it, and then we'll show the quote. He says, the essence of swearing oaths that Jesus is targeting here is about invoking something or someone else, especially God, and here it is, to impress others with their sincerity and reliability, and thus gain acceptance of what they're saying and what they want. It's a method for getting their way, right? Like, I'll finish a quote here, but like if I say, hey, I promise you, and I swear on my mother's grave, because again, we do have some of this still, yeah, we get this, right? Oh man, I wasn't going to trust you, but if you do that, now I have to? Like it's kind of trying to force them to get their way. It is simply a device of manipulation designed to override the person's judgment and the will of the ones they are focusing upon, to push them aside rather than respecting them and leaving their decision and action strictly up to them. So when we understand that as the dynamic, it helps us to see where the instruction of Jesus here that we're reading might actually broadly apply to a lot of modern contexts. So yeah, like you're not going to leave today going, oh man, I guess I got to stop swearing by the gift of the altar. But I do think there are some actual challenges for us today if we let Jesus' word speak to us today. And it's helpful to acknowledge that what he's dealing with here, before we jump into the specifics, Jesus is dealing with the heart of it and how it makes it all, what makes this all bad is that at the end of the day, it's essentially replacing loving others and operating in a truthfulness and direct honesty with people instead with spin. You're manipulating. You're using your God and the things of God to manipulate people, whether you mean to or not. And that's one of the things, again, we're going to see today, is that a lot of, I believe, good Christians are doing it and not even meaning to do it, but hopefully we will learn from Jesus' teaching and recognize, okay, I don't even want to get close to it, because what we want to do instead is we want to love our neighbor and not spin to go ahead and manipulate them. So while you may or may not ever make an oath by Jerusalem or by your head, like Jesus' examples, we're going to look to see where this same reality still exists in modern oaths. And we're going to start, just so you're forewarned, with what I think is the most severe and the probably most self-evident. Like, we'd all go, yeah, that's bad. But that's a way of, again, modernizing what Jesus is talking about here. And we're going to get to the subtle ways where we may not even realize it by the end of this. And again, all this changing last minute this morning, the slides are no longer actually anything of, so you can just put the last one on, Sermon on the Mount, and you're good to go, Leah. Thanks. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. But note takers, if you want to, point A of these different modern applications would be coercion. And if you're like, how do I spell coercion? C-O-E-R-C-I-O-N. C-O-E-R-C-I-O-N. But this would also be spiritual abuse. So what we're doing here is we're talking about the name of the Lord or the things of the Lord being used as heavy-handed tools to bulldoze over people, to shut down any and all conversations, to do outright, to demand outright things from people more or less against their will or their desires. That's what spiritual abuse would be in large swaths. Yeah? Yeah? Because of that, I think there's three particular groups of people, if that's what coercion, and this is like most extreme heavy-handed one is, I think there's three groups of people that are most likely to do this, not saying they're the only ones, but pastors, prophets, and parents. And I'll explain it to you. I say that because typically what you're dealing with when it comes to this is somebody who's already in power, and they're trying to strong-arm somebody who's already kind of beneath them to doing something because God said. And so they're using the things of God, or God specifically, to make themselves essentially untouchable by any opposition. So it could be a prophet or a teacher. Let's go with that one first. And they go, "Thus saith the Lord." And I hope you've not dealt with this where people go and like throw that around a lot. But I've got a word from the Lord. "Thus saith the Lord." And it's like, well, how are you going to argue with that now? And so if somebody says, like, I've heard from God, this is, well, straight from the Lord. So to argue with them, means you're arguing with God. So again, I'm using prophet loosely here, but a prophet, anybody who speaks for God and tells you that they're speaking for God, if you go up against them, what are you doing? You're going up against God. Yeah, so when they do that, that is coercion. That is basically the same thing. Could be pastors. And again, hopefully you never experience this at any church you're a part of, but it could be things like, hey, don't touch the Lord's anointed, which is a verse used out of context from the Bible that basically goes, I'm untouchable, don't question me. To question a pastor is to question the Lord, and that's unhealthy to have that kind of idea. I think it's good to be respectful of those in leadership and to honor our people in authority. That's biblical, by the way. It's not just that I think that, it's biblical. But when anybody uses theology or theological positions as a weapon to control the actions of people underneath them, that is using the things of God, like an oath, to go ahead and go, your free will is no longer yours. You have to. Don't question the Lord's anointed. How dare you question? Again, whether that pastor says it or somebody else goes, you cannot ever question, because that's the anointed man of God. Yeah, making sense? Okay. And then let me explain the parents part, because you're like, oh yeah, pastors and prophets, we don't trust them anyway. Thanks. But parents, come on, Jonathan, especially on Mother's Day, of all people, like parents, let me explain this one, because I think what can happen, again, maybe not even intending to do it, but when a parent takes a command that is from God, that is of God, to honor your mother and your father. It's of God, it's from God, it's one of the 10 commandments, yes? When they take that to then be a blank check that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, essentially, and yet get whatever they feel they deserve from their children, regardless of age or stage, that is coercion. That is taking a command of God and going, this allows me to do whatever I want, and you have to do whatever I want as a result from that. Listen, I do not think we get to go, hey, when God said honor your father and mother, he didn't know my situation. My parents are actually imperfect. So, no, ain't been perfect parents. Jesus got left at the temple, y'all. ain't been a perfect parent ever. Honoring is still a thing, but when it's used, I'm talking about coercion and I'm talking about abuse. I'm talking about the finger pointing, you need to do this. All these situations and others where God or things of God are being used as a power play are not actually of God. But that's the heavy-handed version. Note takers, B is manipulating. That would be the level down, because this is one where it's similar but less heavy-handed. Instead, it's more persuasive. It's less like, you need to, and it's just like, hey, So it could be a leader telling those that they expect absolute loyalty from to do this thing that I'm telling you to do and do it for Jesus. So you're using the Jesus card just to kind of like, hey, come on, let's do this for Jesus. And it's like, well, am I doing it for Jesus, or am I doing it because you told me I kind of need to, and you demand loyalty from me? It could be a spiritual leader, pastor or otherwise, doing hey, if you really loved God. Which, by the way, it's good offering talk right there, right? Good giving talk. Hey, if you really love God, I'm going to write that down, right? If you really loved God, I'm telling you. That's manipulation. It could be, God told me you need to. Oh, okay, God told me you need to. It could also be even scriptures taken out of context. Hey, scripture says, and I wish I brought my Bible up, but it's back in my bag, so I can't thump my Bible at you guys, but scripture says, judge not, which I can't wait, because that's actually in the Sermon on the Mount, so we're going to study what Jesus meant. But when it's that whole judge not, or, hey, submit to ruling authorities, and like the ancient Israelite throwdown of hey, I swear by the gold on the altar, what you can be doing with this judge not, or, hey, submit to the ruling authorities, is you're essentially shutting down conversation that would actually deal with the nuance and the nitty-gritty of it. And you're going, listen, Jesus said, boom, done. It's like, yeah, submit to the ruling authorities, but didn't Paul kind of disobey the ruling authorities? Yes? Judge not, Matthew 7. Again, I can't help myself this morning. Judge not, Matthew 7. Do you know what the next thing Jesus says is? Don't cast your pearls before swine. How are you going to know what a swine is if judging is basically just the same as assessing? So yeah, let's be careful that we're not manipulating and going, hey, conversation's over because that's not, just the way that oaths would do that, we are not called to do that in our modern context of how we would do that as well. Last thing I'll say for manipulation, and again, this is a way that we can do this without intending to, is we look at success, whether it's ministry success or interpersonal, and that ends up being used to baptize anything and everything they're doing as God must be for that person or them. Come on. That church, I know you might think that they're kind of like, sacrilege, or their teaching is bad, or they've done some like immoral leader, but that leader couldn't be immoral because look how successful the church is. That's not how that works. Or, hey, I feel like God must be in this because I'm financially profiting, or everything seems to be lining up and it's going really easily. As if the enemy of your soul wants to give you a hard time if you're going down the path of destruction. Not always. So we can't use it as like, oh, well, God must be in this because I'm seeing blessing in that. C, last one. This is, I think, again, we've gotten down to the point now where this is the easiest one for us to do. And it's simply borrowing someone or something else's credit. That's what an oath is. Like, I swear to God because my word's not good enough, so let me go ahead and put him. So this is where borrowing someone or something else's credit, we're descending down into the most common ways, because it may be too bold for a lot of us to go, hey, God told me that you need to, right? That might be too bold for a lot of us to do to somebody else. I feel like God's leading me to. Now, y'all with me? I'm a pastor who felt God called him to plant a church in Fredericksburg. It was very clear God was calling me to do it. I feel like God still speaks today, both because I'm charismatic and also because I've experienced it and also because of my scriptures, which again, are back in my bag. And but the scriptures tell us that God still speaks, yes? So God still speaks. But it's also very possible that we go, because we understand that people may not trust our word or trust us or may have insecurities or maybe like, I haven't been trustworthy, whatever it might be. We don't even realize we're doing it. But it may be that we, instead of just going, this is what I'm really thinking I need to do, I feel like God's telling me to. There's certain words that we use that start to kind of create more weight to it. Because if somebody goes to me and says, hey, I feel like God's telling, as a pastor even, I'm like, ooh, am I going to go up against what God is doing in this moment? Rightfully so. Yes, church? So if God's not in it, friend, then don't bring him into it. What I mean by, like, bring him into it the level that he's actually into it. Like, don't go ahead and say, well, God's telling me, unless you're sure of it, because then, again, that is using God's name in vain. Wouldn't it be better if we, if we're not able to be understood to be trustworthy, or if maybe people don't think we're wise, we grow in those things, rather than just using God and borrow his credit to go ahead and baptize our decisions. It's delicate and perhaps almost imperceivable when we do this, that we're sidestepping out of our personal responsibility to just own where we're actually at, and instead we're using God that way. But it's so subtle that because of that, we may not realize we're doing it, but it's there in our hearts. And the reality that Jesus has already gotten into with anger and lust is that our hearts actually matter. So if we become used to weaving our words in a way to get what we want from people, it'll only expand and grow bigger more and more. And Jesus calls his followers to keep from using God's stuff to bolster your words. And so he concludes this chunk of teachings. We'll end today with this. So Lee, I know I called you off, but you're back on duty. Can you go back to the Matthew 5:37? But let your word yes be yes, and your no be no. So as they pull that up, the literal Greek of this, by the way, is let your word or your statement be yes, yes, no, no. So that's what it literally means, is what Jesus is saying, let your word be yes, yes, no, no. In other words, allow your word to be straightforward and able to be taken as it is. Anything more than this is from the evil one. Anything more than this is from the evil one. Now, for those who've been like maybe either here for the series so far or catching up online, you've already noticed that Jesus is consistently pointing back to the garden in these subtle ways. He's pointing back to Genesis. He keeps on doing that. Like we did when he talked about marriage and what God designed it to be. And so Jesus is constantly pointing back to the garden and all that. And this connection that he makes here, I think, is so clever and actually helps it to become fairly clear once we know the heart behind oaths, what Jesus is getting at by saying anything more than letting your yes be yes and your no be no is from the evil one. Because the evil one that we see in the Garden of Eden is, is appearing as a serpent, right? And the serpent in the garden actually quoted the words of God. Just kind of changed a word or two. Yeah? To his advantage, he used the words of God. Hasn't God told you? Come on, somebody. Anybody remember that part of Genesis? Didn't God say? So he uses the word, he pulls God into the conversation. The enemy from the very beginning did not actually push God outright. He pulled God in, but changed his words to go ahead and get what he wanted. So when we try to use God and his authority and his words to deceptively add credence to our words, that's replicating the pattern of the serpent. We become snakes to each other when we do that. And Jesus is saying about righteousness, it's doing right by God and right by others. That's what righteousness is. Jesus is saying, hey, doing right by others means keeping your word simple and being trustworthy at face value. Being able to be somebody that people can trust. And so as we land the plane and talk about what it would look like for our lives, I think there's some simple, very practical, and maybe uncomfortably practical applications for us today. One of the first ones would be, let's be careful about over-promising and under-delivering. Right? That when we say we're going to do something, we don't need to, because some of us, and again, I'll call myself out, and that way I can call us all out, or at least call who I'm calling out. I did it today. I literally had to apologize to our team a little bit, and I was like, I told you I was going to do something by last night, didn't do it. How ironic that I get to preach this today. Yay. But to my overpromisers in the room, and that's not all of us, but if this is you, I'm going to get in your business. When you know that you overpromise and you underdeliver, you know what you tend to do more of? Promising. More than anyone else. It's not just, you start flowering it up. You start building it up. You start promising more and more. You're like, oh, I'm going to get it to you by 5 p.m. No, make it 4 p.m. Like, nobody was asking for it, but you go more and more because you know this reality that you are not being true to your word. So we need to work on that. We need to let the Spirit of God work on that. We need to be careful also that we're not making rash promises. I think that is the moral of the story with Jephthah. Is not that, hey, if you make stupid promises, God will just bless you, and that must be God was all for it. It's what a sad thing that you did that. Be careful about the promises you make. I think it also is a good application for us today to leave here today, being careful to not over-spiritualize things. That we should be people who are people of God. We talk about God. We care about the things of God. But we are not going to go into the realm of over-spiritualizing things so that we can borrow some of the credit of God and what is holy to then push for our agendas or make our words bolstered up. Yeah? Also, kind of connected to that one, got to be careful that we don't sidestep our own personal responsibility and what is real by spiritualizing things. Oh, it must be the enemy. No, you just didn't plan. You haven't been a wise, good steward. Be careful about how we're seeing, because when we add all these other things to it, when we take God and we just borrow a little bit from him and then extrapolate all this over here, that's the evil one. So imagine this. Imagine a world where Christians, those who follow Jesus, sons and daughters of Jesus, were remarkably, noticeably truthful. We're trustworthy. Man, if they say they're going to do it, the ones who have the fish logo, you want those people. You know, y'all get what I'm saying with it. Yeah, okay. The Christians were reasonable. Like when you argue with them, when you debate with them, when you don't see things the same way, they're not going to just willy-nilly go, well, the Lord, they talk about God. They care about God, but it's grounded in, let your reason be evident to all. Reasonableness be evident to all. And they're reliable. Man, you can trust them. A Christian that is trustworthy, where spiritual things are only ever truly genuine, that they're never used to manipulate the actions or beliefs of others. Man, if you imagine a world filled with Christians who are all that way, that's like a city on a hill, isn't it? Man, that'd be a light worth following. That would be a salt that would purify a really corrupted world where people are constantly lying to each other, where people are constantly manipulating each other, where people are trying to spin things and leave certain things out so that they can get what they want from people. The world we live in would look a lot different if Christians would, well, here's I guess what I'm saying, would be the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And that's what we're invited to, yes? So, as we look at this today, what does it look like for us to go, you know what, I'm embracing this new way. I want to let my words and my promises, the things that come out of me that are coming from within me, be purified. So that when people look at you and when people look at us, they go, those are the people who I can trust, who are reliable, who aren't going to try and pull anything over on me. I may not agree with them, a lot of the world might say, but I'd love it if more and more people go, I may not agree with them, but I really do see them operating differently. I can trust them differently than I can trust other people. What a light to the glory of Christ that would be. Let's pray. God, we thank you that as we see your kingdom fleshed out, as you, in your own words, Jesus, get to tell us, hey, this is what it looks like to be in the kingdom of heaven, for it to be fulfilled. God, I thank you that we can do the two things that we're soon going to get to studying in the Lord's Prayer. We can pray, your kingdom come, your will be done. And we can participate in your kingdom coming and your will being done. So Jesus, this morning, I pray, we each pray, would you purify our hearts so that the overflow that comes out of them, that is our mouth, would speak what is true, honest, reliable, and trustworthy. God, if there's ways where we've gotten clever or creative, where we maybe even unknowingly have used things of God to boost up and bolster up our words, where we've propped up our own untrustworthiness or our insecurities, whatever it might be, with things of God, God, we repent of that. We pray that you would reveal that to us, that we would instead have a determination that by your grace, and that's the only way it's possible, but by your grace, we would be trustworthy people. We would be people who we speak in ways that when others hear us, they don't have to wonder, what's the agenda? Or, oh, you're trying to just manipulate me. We are, like Jesus, straightforward, honest, compassionate. And because we care for others, we refuse to try and manipulate them. Jesus, thank you for not manipulating us. Thank you for being honest with us. Would you help us to be a city on a hill as we live this way in this world? In Jesus' name, amen.